Amanda Collins stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the sundress that clung to her shoulders. 9 years of marriage had taught her to dress in layers and earth tones and loose-fitting clothes that didn't invite comment. The woman staring back at her had soft brown eyes and sun-kissed hair, but those eyes held something different today. Rebellion. She was tired in a way that sleep could never fix. Downstairs, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his coffee mug and his newspaper, though nobody read newspapers anymore. He just liked having something to hide behind when he didn't want to talk. Amanda had learned to recognize these moods. They usually meant he was irritated about something, or everything. She came down, and he looked up, and his jaw tightened just slightly. "Where are you going dressed like that?" he said. His voice wasn't mean exactly, but it had that edge to it, the one that made her explain herself even when she didn't need to. "Jason called this morning," Amanda said carefully. "He wants me to come to the beach house this weekend with some friends. It's just a few days getaway." Ethan put down his coffee slowly. "You mean the beach house where Jason Miller will be practically drooling over you all weekend?" he said. The way he said Jason's name made it sound like an accusation, like friendship was a cover for something darker and more dangerous. "Ethan, don't start this," Amanda said, sighing heavily. "We went to high school together. He got engaged last year. He's just a friend." Ethan stood up and walked to the window. His shoulders were tense, and his reflection in the glass looked angry, though she couldn't see his face directly. He looked like a man convinced of something terrible. After 9 years, Amanda could read his moods the way other people read books. "I don't want you going," he said without turning around. Something about his tone made it clear this wasn't a request. This wasn't even a discussion. This was a boundary drawn in stone. Amanda felt something shift inside her chest, something that had been building for months, maybe years. She thought about the bikini in the back of her closet, the one Ethan had called trashy and inappropriate, the one she had bought 3 years ago and never worn. She thought about how long it had been since she felt like herself, how long since anyone looked at her without judgment or disapproval. "I want to go," she said quietly. "I need to go." Ethan finally turned from the window, and his eyes met hers, and there was pain there, underneath the anger. Pain and fear and something else she couldn't name. He looked like a man losing something he desperately wanted to hold. "Then you're choosing them over us," he said. "You're choosing Jason Miller over your marriage." Amanda felt her heart breaking, but something in her was also becoming clear, sharp and certain, like glass cutting through fog. She realized in that moment that she had been breaking for a long time, and maybe this trip wasn't about defying Ethan. Maybe it was about remembering who she used to be before she became small enough to fit inside his rules. The beach house sat on stilts, overlooking the Atlantic, and Amanda stepped out of her car with her small suitcase, feeling like a stranger arriving in a foreign country. She had told Ethan she was going, and he had not responded. He had simply turned away from her and walked upstairs and locked himself in his study. That silence had been worse than any argument. Jason was waiting on the porch, and when he saw her, his face broke into a genuine smile that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. He had always had that quality, the ability to make her feel like she mattered, just by looking at her. Of course, Ethan hated him for exactly that reason. "You came," he said, embracing her warmly. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," Amanda admitted. There were 3 other people there too, Jason's fiancée, Michelle, and another couple named Robert and Sarah. They greeted Amanda with genuine warmth, and she felt the tension in her shoulders begin to loosen for the first time in days. That first evening, they sat on the deck with wine and laughter, and nobody asked her to be smaller or quieter or more appropriate. Nobody criticized what she wore or who she talked to. The bikini was still in her suitcase, but she could feel it there like a promise, like a secret waiting to be told. The next morning, Amanda woke to sunlight streaming through the windows, and for a moment, she forgot to be afraid. She forgot about Ethan and his disappointed face and his controlling voice. She just felt young and alive and hopeful. She pulled on the bikini slowly, half expecting lightning to strike. But nothing happened. The world didn't end. God didn't punish her. She just looked like herself again.
When she came downstairs, Jason did a double take, and she saw his expression shift. "You look beautiful, Amanda," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her feel seen in a way that terrified and thrilled her all at once. They spent the day at the beach, and Amanda felt herself loosening, like a flower opening to the sun. She ran in the water and let the waves knock her down and didn't worry about her hair or her makeup. She walked barefoot in the sand and felt the warmth seeping into her bones. Michelle and Sarah were kind and fun, and they never once made her feel judged or small. But it was Jason who kept finding reasons to be near her. Jason who offered her his sunscreen and laughed at her jokes and looked at her like she was interesting and important. That evening, as the sun turned the sky orange and pink, Jason invited her to walk along the shoreline. The others were inside preparing dinner, and Amanda knew she should offer to help, but she also knew she wanted to go. She wanted this moment away from everyone else. She wanted to be alone with someone who made her feel like herself, and that desire itself felt like a betrayal, but also like the most honest thing she had felt in years.
They walked without talking at first, and Amanda felt the wet sand between her toes and the ocean breeze on her face, and she thought, this must be what peace feels like. The sun was sinking lower, and the whole world seemed painted in gold. Jason walked beside her, and he didn't try to fill the silence with empty words the way Ethan always did. He just let her be. After a while, Jason spoke softly. "Amanda, I know what's going on with Ethan. I mean, not everything, but enough. Michelle told me some things, and you look so sad, even when you're trying to smile." Amanda turned to face him, and suddenly she couldn't hold back the emotions that had been building inside her for years. Her voice came out shaky and small. "He hates that you're my friend," he said. "He thinks there's something between us. He forbade me from coming here," Amanda said. "He told me I was choosing you over him. Like I can't have both. Like love is supposed to be this cage where I disappear completely." Jason listened, and his face held such compassion, such genuine concern, that she felt the tears start to flow down her cheeks. Then he did something simple and devastating. He reached out and pulled her into an embrace. His arms around her were gentle but strong, and he smelled like sunscreen and sea salt and something purely Jason. Amanda buried her face in his shoulder, and she let herself feel everything. She let herself feel how long it had been since someone held her without trying to control or diminish her. She let herself feel how much she needed this simple human kindness. When she finally pulled away, Jason kept one hand on her back and looked at her with such tenderness that it made her heart ache. He brushed a strand of wet hair from her face and tucked it behind her ear. There was nothing inappropriate in the gesture, but everything about it felt electrifying and wrong and absolutely right all at once. "You deserve to be happy, Amanda," he said softly. "You deserve to be yourself. You deserve to be loved without conditions or criticism or fear." She knew he was right. She also knew that accepting this truth meant something fundamental had shifted in her marriage, meant that she could never go back to being the smaller version of herself, that she had tasted freedom and there was no returning to the cage. The ocean crashed beside them, and Amanda felt like she was standing at the edge of everything she had ever known. Behind her was safety and duty and the life she had built. Ahead of her was uncertainty and possibility, and Jason. The photographs would be taken that weekend, innocent images of people enjoying the beach, but they would tell a story that Ethan would read completely wrong. And by the time she returned home, nothing would ever be the same again. Amanda arrived home on Sunday evening, and the house felt different, cold, unwelcoming, like she was returning to a place that no longer belonged to her. Her suitcase sat heavy in her hands as she pushed open the front door and called out for Ethan. The silence that answered her was deafening. She found him in the living room sitting in the dark with just the blue glow of his laptop screen illuminating his face. His expression was unreadable, but his shoulders were rigid with tension. Amanda set down her suitcase slowly and waited for him to speak, but he just stared at the screen with an intensity that made her stomach drop. "I saw the pictures," Ethan said finally, his voice low and dangerous. "Someone tagged you on Facebook. Michelle, I think, before she could make them private." Amanda felt her throat tighten. She had known this might happen. Part of her had even expected it, but hearing it said aloud made it real in a way she wasn't prepared for. "They were just innocent photos, Ethan," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "We were at the beach with friends." He turned to face her, and his eyes were red, like he had been crying or screaming into pillows. He looked at her like she was a stranger, like she was someone he no longer recognized. "Innocent," Amanda, laughing bitterly. "There's a photo of you in that bikini, the one I told you was trashy, standing so close to Jason that there isn't daylight between you two. And then later, you two walking alone on the beach at sunset. Tell me how that's innocent." "I was upset, and Jason was being a friend," Amanda said, and she could hear the defensiveness creeping into her voice. "Nothing happened between us." "Nothing happened yet," he said, and the words felt like a slap. "I could see it in both your faces, Amanda, the way he looks at you, the way you let yourself be comforted by him instead of your own husband." Amanda felt anger rising up to meet his jealousy. After 9 years of letting him dictate her clothes, her friends, her life, she was done explaining herself. "You pushed me away," Amanda said, voice strong now. "Every time I needed you, you made me feel small and wrong. You criticized everything I did, everything I wore, everything I wanted. Jason was kind to me. Jason made me feel like I mattered. That is what you saw in those photos. That is what made you so angry." Ethan stood up and paced the room like a caged animal. "I did everything for you," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? By running off to the beach and flirting with your ex-boyfriend?" "He was never my ex-boyfriend," Amanda said quietly, "and that's not what this is about anyway. This is about you finally realizing that you can't control me anymore, that you lost me a long time ago, and these photographs are just proof of what you already knew." The admission hung between them, heavy and irreversible. Ethan looked at her like his heart was breaking in real time. And for a moment, Amanda felt a flicker of the guilt that had haunted her all weekend. But then she remembered Jason, holding her. She remembered feeling like herself. She remembered that the problem had never been Jason. The problem had always been Ethan and his need to own her completely. The lawyer's office was sterile and professional, and Amanda sat across from a woman named Patricia who specialized in divorce cases. It had been 2 weeks since the confrontation with Ethan, and those 2 weeks had felt like 2 years. She had tried, God knew she had tried, to salvage something from the ruins of her marriage. She had suggested counseling, and Ethan had refused. She had suggested they take time apart and think, and he had only grown more angry, more accusatory. He had called Jason repeatedly and left voicemails full of rage and betrayal. He had demanded she choose between him and her friends, and when she refused, he had made the choice for her. The paperwork sat in front of her, and Patricia explained the terms of the separation. Ethan had agreed to most of her requests, perhaps because he too had realized there was nothing left to fight for. Amanda signed her name where indicated and felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief wash over her. After the meeting, Amanda sat in her car in the parking lot for a long time. She thought about the woman she had been just a month ago, the woman who wore loose clothes and apologized for existing, the woman who had become so small that she barely cast a shadow. That woman felt like someone else entirely now, someone she used to know in another lifetime. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jason. "How did it go?" he asked, and she could feel the concern in those simple words. "It's done," she typed back, and she meant it in every way. The marriage was done, the pretending was done, the diminishing of herself was done. "Can I see you tonight?" he texted, and Amanda stared at those 5 words for a long moment. The right thing to do would be to say no, to give herself time to process the end of her marriage, to make sure that Jason wasn't just a escape from Ethan, but something real and substantial. But she had spent 9 years doing the right thing. She had spent 9 years making choices that pleased other people, and it had destroyed her. Yes, she wrote back. That evening, Jason picked her up from her apartment, which she had rented furnished, in a building full of other people starting over. He looked at her with those eyes that didn't judge and didn't demand, and he took her hand gently. "I want you to know something," he said as they drove toward the beach. "I have feelings for you, real feelings, but I also know you need time. I know you need space to figure out who you are on your own. So that's what I'm going to give you." Amanda felt tears prick her eyes, but this time they were different. These were tears of gratitude and hope and possibility. They walked on the same beach where everything had changed, and this time the sky was clear and starlit. Amanda looked at Jason, and then at the vast ocean, and then at her own reflection in the sand, and she realized something had shifted fundamentally. She was no longer waiting for permission to be herself. She was no longer shrinking to fit into someone else's vision of who she should be. "I don't know what comes next," she said, smiling softly, "but for the first time in a very long time, I'm not afraid to find out." Jason squeezed her hand, and they walked into the future together, not rushing, not forcing, but simply allowing themselves to discover what could bloom between them when there were no cages and no control and no one demanding that she be anything less than entirely herself. The woman in the bikini was no longer a rebellious act. She was simply Amanda, and that was enough.